guys, I'm Gjorgji. Today's presentation is blue themed, hence my blue outfit. Mario already pronounced the title, so I'm not just gonna go straight ahead. So, what's Dart? A lot of you didn't know about Dart, so let's start with the definition first. When you go to Dart's front page, you see this sentence first. It's an approachable, portable, and productive language for high-quality apps on any platform. A little bit of history of Dart. It's made by a team at Google. It was created in 2011, I think, in Denmark. The idea with Dart at the start was to make a so-called JavaScript killer. A lot of people weren't on board with that, and they blamed Google for trying to embed a Dart virtual machine inside Chrome so that you can type Dart natively inside the browser instead of using JavaScript. But that idea didn't come to fruition. Some years afterwards, with the release of Flutter, Dart became suddenly popular with mobile apps as well as desktop apps. These are a lot of buzzwords, so I want to go by them one by one. Dart is approachable. This means that it's a modern language with a strong type system. It has null safety. It supports patterns. It supports mixins. It supports advanced enumerations, not just simple ones. You can have properties inside the enumerations. You can also have methods in them. Dart is also portable. You can compile Dart anywhere. You can compile it to machine code, to ARM, x64. You can also compile it to JavaScript. And since May this year, you can also compile it to WebAssembly, which actually increases the performance of Dart on the web. Dart is also productive. You can make changes iteratively. It has a superb hot reload feature, and you can see the results instantly in your running app. This is especially useful in Flutter, because traditionally, when you're developing mobile apps, you have to make a change, and then you have to compile the entire app to see the changes, and it could take minutes. Imagine changing a margin and just waiting 5 minutes for the app to build again so you can view the changes. Flutter excels at this. You make the change, you save it, and it gets displayed on your screen immediately. Other frameworks like Jetpack Compose don't have hot reload exactly. They have views that you can customize and see the changes inside your window, but you can't see the entire app. Some systems like Xamarin and Maui have hot reload, but it sometimes works, it sometimes doesn't. It's not as well as this one. What's interesting about Dart is that initially it only had ahead-of-time compilation. And that's not really useful for hot reload features. Since the creation of Flutter, the Dart team has worked on the just-in-time compiler for Dart that allows this superb hot reload feature to work. Dart is also free. Is also free, open source, and is supported by Google. Although some people are saying that the Dart team and the Flutter team have had layoffs recently, so I'm not sure how long it's going to be supported by Google. It's famously, Google is famous for throwing stuff at the wall and killing anything that doesn't stick. And most importantly, Dart is not Flutter. I've seen this with a lot of people online. They conflate Dart and Flutter as the same thing. Although they're tightly coupled, they're definitely not the same thing. Why did Flutter choose Dart? Because Flutter is a Google product, is a Google framework, although it's free and open source as well. So when the Flutter team was first creating the framework, they had to make a choice which language to use. They decided to use Dart because it's also handled by Google, and they could work closely with the team and make changes to the language that could support Flutter, like the just-in-time compilation that allows Flutter's hot reload feature to work. I want to show you how Dart code works first. Dermatologists are always in a hurry. They spend all day making rash decisions. That's cool. I'm going to open this. I have a small demo over here that showcases some of the features of Dart. Can you guys read this? I don't usually use light themes, but I figured it's easier to read when I'm presenting. But I'm just gonna... Okay, this works. So this is basically how the Dart language looks like. We have our entry point of the application. We declare arrays like this. We have support for functional programming. We have map and reduce. We have map and reduce functions. We also have async programming. It supports async and await, similarly to how JavaScript works, but it doesn't use promises. It uses futures, which are basically the same thing. We also have null safety, and we have classes and mixins. This is how you declare an async function. You return a future of a string. This is how you declare a class. This is how you declare a mixin. Mixins are somewhat like classes, but it's a way to solve the diamond inheritance problem, where with a mixin, you just inject the methods and properties of this mixin inside this class. So you can have multiple mixins, but only extend a single class, like this. So I'm just gonna go ahead and run this. Okay, so let me zoom this in. We have the sum of squares of the array. We have fetching data. It works for some time. It waits for a second. It says that it's fetched the data. And our cat successfully meows. I want to show you how you can compile the Dart code as well. Let me just do this. I can just do something like this. I'm going to Dart compile. Let me go help. And I can show you the available subcommands. I can compile to an ahead of time snapshot. I can compile to an executable. I can compile to a just-in-time snapshot. I can compile to Jazz, kernel, and Wasm. However, that's pronounced in English. So let's try this. I'm going to compile it to an exe. I'm going to say yeah, it compiled, and I can see that it's executable, and I can run it like this. It's the same thing. Now I'm gonna try compile it to JS. It's gonna work, and it compiles. Let me open it so you can see how it looks like. Is it open? No, I didn't press enter. Okay. So this is the compiled JS, a huge wall of text. I'm gonna try copying it and putting it inside a browser. And hit enter, and my browser crashed. Well, but it works. See, the cat meows, and my data is fetched. Yeah, that's basically how this works. I can also compile to whatever else I want. For example, Wasm. Oops, the extension. Let me cut this so you can see how it looks like. Yep, looks like Wasm to me, but what do I know? Okay, let's get back to my presentation. Okay, what's Flutter? Flutter is actually a framework for building beautiful UIs across platforms. You can build UI on mobile apps, for desktop apps, and also for the web. A slogan for Flutter is that you can build UIs on anything that has a screen, even embedded devices. But can you build web apps with it? Yes. And there are some fun web apps, although it's not, I'm going to get to that in a minute. It's not the most viable for web. But some products like Google Earth work with Flutter. This is entirely a Flutter app. It's actually the same one that you can use on mobile phones. Let's see if the internet likes us this time. Yep, this is entirely a Flutter app. How does Flutter work on the web? It technically does something like, I'm not going to put any HTML elements on the screen. I'm just going to take a canvas and paint everything myself. So this is, you can't inspect this. You can't copy anything like this. So it's not really useful for websites like blogs where you have content and like to read them. It's mostly used for web applications. And this is stressed also by the Flutter team that you can't really, it's not meant for websites, for content-rich sites. There's also this fun little app called the Pinball Machine. This was presented at Google I/O, I think, 2 years ago. They were presenting Flutter's capabilities for building games. And this is a sample game. It's a pinball. Select party here, and I have some flippers. Yeah, this is all built in Flutter. Flutter can make this. This could be difficult to make in HTML, so Flutter excels at this stuff. There's also a little fun site over here. And you may see the limitations of Flutter right now. This is all made in Flutter. But you can see that it kind of stutters, especially because I'm on Firefox. It works a bit better in Chrome. But yeah, this is a demo of Flutter's capabilities on the web. Let me get back to my presentation. Okay, so these were all web apps. And if you noticed, every time I start the app up, there was a loading screen. It had to download everything it needed to run Flutter on the web. And that can become tedious. Wonderos with 7 wonders was also a bit janky. It's not the projector, it's just how Flutter works on the web. And sadly, it doesn't have too much support. People say that Flutter should stop supporting the web and focus exclusively on desktop and mobile platforms, as well as embedded stuff. But Flutter is not the only framework for Dart. Dart also supports other frameworks that are either supported by companies or made by some people in their free time. There's some interesting web frameworks here. You also have Angular Dart, fitting because Angular is also a Google product. You can also see the blue theme here. It's still the old logo, they haven't updated it yet. But I work with Angular with TypeScript at work, and I wasn't really interested in learning Angular Dart as well. But Jasper is a framework that's based on a similar syntax to Flutter. It's a client and server-side rendered framework that uses Flutter's declarative approach to building UIs. So if you use Flutter, Jasper is gonna come like second nature. I have a Jasper app prepared over here. Unlike Flutter, this is HTML and CSS. I also use Tailwind. I can copy stuff here. It's reactive. I signed up to speak at What a Stack. I got nervous and panicked. I prepared a presentation yesterday, and I'm currently speaking, so I'll check this off later. And we can party afterwards. I can also remove stuff, and I can add stuff. So it properly works. And if I refresh this, it's going to stay because I'm using a web server. More on that later. Let me show you how the code looks like for Jasper. So this is basically how the homepage looks like. If anyone uses Flutter, it's basically the same thing. You use setState to manage the reactivity and change the state of the page. Here we see a future. And we have the build method over here. So what's different than Flutter is that because HTML elements can have multiple children, you can also have a synchronous function synchronous generator function that yields different elements at the same time. I can type something like this. And this is valid HTML. It's going to work. It's going to render the div first, the empty div, and then afterwards it's going to render my site. It has full support for TypeScript, for Tailwind, I mean. And sadly, the extension in VS Code doesn't really support Dart, and I wasn't able to configure it. We also have the attributes over here. We define our classes like this. We define text with a component. We can also add attributes, any attributes like this. It's a dictionary. I set a placeholder for input like this. We also have event handlers like onChange. I can show you. You can also add custom events. These aren't really properties in the. This isn't the property in the form component, but you can add it in the events dictionary, submit. You also have the prevent default option for the events so that when I submit, it doesn't refresh my page. And I can use this Dart syntax that I think is really cozy for building declarative UIs. I can also spread a list of elements. This is a to-do item. I'm going to show you how that looks. This is my to-do component. It's a stateless component. It has properties that are final. And it handles the events like this. Here's a click event for the div, because by default the component doesn't have this property. And yeah, that's basically how Jasper looks like. Okay, this is all fine, dandy, but can we make web servers with it? Well, of course you can. There were a lot of options for web servers. I found that Dartfrog is a pretty recent one, and it's supported by a company that works with Flutter, and they wanted to use Dart on their backend as well. So they developed this API framework that's inspired by Next.js. I'm gonna show you how this looks like. Actually, the backend for this is made entirely in Dart. Technically, it's a Dart full stack application. Let me show you how this looks like. So we have our roots over here. What's interesting about Dartfrog is that it uses directory-based routing. It also supports wildcards like ID. It also supports middlewares. I use this middleware to handle my course requests. I have an index here. This is directly on the routes, so on any request, it's going to return a hello, what a stack. I have something like this. If I do delete, it's going to say the same thing. I'm going to show you how Dartfrog handles the different request methods. If I go to API/todo, I have my own request method here, and I switch the request methods. If it's a get method, I get my to-dos, I map them to JSON and return them. If it's a post method, I await my add to-do method. It adds my to-do to my in-memory repository and returns the created one. And anything else, it's going to say that it's not found. Let me show you how this looks like. These are all of my to-dos. I create a to-do like this. And if I try to, I don't know, say delete here, it's going to say not found. Maybe a better response code would be method not allowed, but this works as well. I handle the path parameters like this. This is the string of the path parameter, and I just parse it to integer and delete my to-do. Anything else will return not found. I also have an option to toggle my to-dos. I decide to go with the patch method, and anything else returns 404. This is my repository, just a simple in-memory repository. So this is basically it for the backend. A thing that plagues Dart since the beginning is that it can't parse JSON properly. It uses a third-party tool called the build runner and packages to read the code you have, get your annotations, and generate files that parse the JSON and convert some objects to JSON as well. Something like this. I annotate this with JSON serializable, and the tool generates this. And it's a really tedious process. Any change you make, you have to rebuild these files. This also applies to mock services and stuff like that. But Dart has a feature that still has an experimental flag on it. It was announced in May this year. It's called Dart Macros. Macros that is basically a static code generation tool. It will basically work like adding this annotation, and it's going to generate this code for you on the fly in memory. So this tool for code generation will get deprecated. They expect the JSON serializable macro to be ready by the end of the year, and early next year the macro API will be available so everyone can make their own macros. There's a preview over here. So you can see how this looks like. So JSON codable is the macro name. You annotate the class, and any change you make in memory generates an augmented class. It's basically an extension of the class. It's going to generate the from JSON and to JSON methods. So that was it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Gjorgji. That was a really nice presentation. I learned that we can use Dart in almost anything. And I have a quick question to start the QA, since we will ask questions now. I'm used to working with JS and having node modules here, but in the project, I saw that it uses another package. What's the packager that it uses?
It uses a pub package manager. You can see the available packages on pub.dev.
I would assume that it's a more or less less known than NPM, let's say.
Yeah, it definitely is less known.
Yeah. Okay. And how niche is it? How less used is it? Can I find a package for, I don't know, filtering tables or something like that that I would normally find with NPM created by someone?
The thing is, Flutter is less used than a lot of JS frameworks, especially on the web. And the community support is sort of lacking compared to Node, but it still has packages. Flutter also supports Flutter Favorites program that has a lot of packages over here that they endorse, that have a lot of tests that are popular and stuff like that. You also have packages for Firebase because that's also a Google product. It's easy to integrate them. You also have different state management solutions. Flutter Block is a state management solution for Dart, but you can also support it for Flutter. It can also work for the web. It's technically framework agnostic. You also have font awesome stuff like that. You also have stuff like React hooks that work with Flutter. State management with React hooks.
Nice. What does that mean? Should we move to React, or how does that integrate with Dart and Flutter?
I feel like for the web it's still not really stable for production. But if you have a team that works with Flutter mobile apps and want to use the same language for the server, that can definitely work. There's also a productive boost for using the same language in the front end and back end as well.
That's always a plus. Okay. Let's hear from the crowd. So do you have any questions? We can kick off the QA. We have a couple of minutes before the next speaker. We have 15 minutes, give or take. Is anyone interested in using Dart in the future? Or are you not? Yeah? Okay. I guess you'll stick to your own frameworks then. Gjorgji, I don't know what does this mean.
My heart aches.
No, I'm really keen into experimenting with new stuff, new technologies, and I love it that it has its own network of packages and stuff like that. Another question, since it's Google supported, right? You said the package manager was pub?
Yep,
Okay.
pub.dev.
Pub.dev. And can I make a package and publish it?
Yeah, you can do that.
That's great. That's great. I read in your bio that you're an open source advocate, so I would assume that it is open source, right?
Yeah, this is open source, although I noticed that there are issues for self-hosting a pub repository. You have to use the public one or make your own. There's an API definition for pub that you can create on your own, but there's no free alternative for this. Everything you post on this is public, although you can license it, like some companies like Syncfusion do.
Nice. That's good to know. So you can start your own Dart project in a couple of hours and maybe publish something on pub if you like. That's good to know. All right. Let's give another round if you want to ask a question. So the mic is open. I will come up to you and give you the microphone. Okay. We have a question.
Hello. Why should I use Flutter and Dart instead of something like React, or for the mobile, something like React Native plus Expo?
I feel like for the web, definitely go with React. It's got more community, it's supported, and you'll find developers on every step of the way for React. But for mobile apps, I haven't tried React Native, although I've attended a couple of presentations, I've looked into it, and I feel like Flutter is the better alternative, just because I don't like the way React renders the components. It communicates directly with the API of the operating system, and Flutter disregards that and says, just give me a blank page, I'm gonna draw every single pixel on it myself. So you have the advantage of this appearing to look the same on each and every device. Doesn't matter if you're running the app on Android or running the app on iOS. And I feel like React Native is a good choice if you have a React team and they also have to make a mobile app. I suppose the learning curve is less.
Okay, thank you for your question. Do you guys have another question about using Dart and its features? Okay. Is pub.dev built in Dart? With Dart?
I have no idea, honestly.
It would be very, very funny if it's built in React.
It would be. Let's see if it is.
Let's see.
It's actually made in Dart, yeah.
That's great. Okay, that's great. That's great. At least pub.dev supports itself, so that's good.
Google also uses Dart and Flutter for their own applications like Google Earth. Google Wallet and Google Pay also use Flutter. And yeah, other companies that use Dart and Flutter are BMW. And usually lesser known companies use Flutter because cross-platform frameworks are more catering to the companies that don't have a lot of money. Because if you have millions to spend on applications, you'll just have separate teams that work on Android and iOS. Yeah.
So you mentioned before, essentially what Dart does is gives you a blank page, a blank canvas, right? And it doesn't render HTML, it just draws inside the canvas?
Nope. Let's see how this looks like if I inspect it. It's a body and it's a fit glass pane. This is it. This is the entire page.
I was asking Darko earlier before I started this talk with you about Dart, and I was like, give me an introduction about Dart. I had known nothing about it. And he was like, you cannot select text in a website built with Dart. And I was like,
with
okay.
Flutter, that's the
Flutter?
distinction.
Okay.
This is made with Flutter.
What about
But
Jasper?
You can select text with Jasper, as shown here. Wait, I can't select that. My browser is frozen.
I don't
Stuck in a debugger.
I don't believe you.
You're gonna have to believe me. Wait, let's close this.
Okay, okay.
Magic. I can
An
select
applause
text.
for selecting text with Dart, please.
Wait.
Thank you.
Let me sketch this off. Thank you, guys.
All right. We have 5 more minutes for the QA. Anybody else wants to ask a question? Okay.
You said that building web applications with Dart is really good, and you said also that there is an option for async functions to be made as well. What is the status for multiprocessing and multi-threading introduction in Dart, and how does it handle it?
How Dart handles multi-thread processing is a little bit unique. It's a single-threaded language, and it runs everything in an event queue. It runs everything on a single thread. But you can use isolates to parallelize processes. These are separate processes that don't share memory, but they can communicate with each other with messages. So if you're doing a lot of bulk processing, you can spawn a lot of isolates, do the processing on them, and return the result back to the calling thread, the main one.
That's a nice topic to touch upon. I saw it uses futures instead of promises.
It's basically the same thing as promises. C# has tasks, but it's the same thing.
Okay, but futures?
Yeah.
Really?
But really a promise? I'm promising you something. No, this is the future.
Okay. I get you do you. You know, I listened to it. I'm just surprised that it uses that keyword in general. Okay. Anybody else? Let's end this session with another question. Final one. Anybody that paid attention? Yes? Do you want to ask a question? Oh, okay. You just raised my hopes for nothing. Thank you. I was gonna say something stupid, but I stopped myself. Yeah, an applause for me, please. Thank you. All right, guys, we're reaching to a close for this session. So one more time, a round of applause for Gjorgji and his presentation.